Okay, let's unpack this. A lot of you reached out, shared this really profound feeling that, well, the world just feels different. Not just, the usual way things change, but like fundamentally off. A
Yeah.
weird energy. Some people even say the colors feel different. You've told us there's this tension and edge, like something bad is hanging about just off camera.
That phrase really captures it, doesn't it?
It really does, and it's clearly resonated. We saw this pop up again and again in a Reddit thread we looked at for this deep dive. People articulating this same thing very uniformly.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how that feeling, that sort of intuition, lines up so closely with, well, concrete data, things from the World Bank, geopolitical intelligence from SpecialEurasia, even industry reports like Fractories on supply chains. So our mission today really is to try and connect those dots for you, to move past just the feeling and explore the real shifts contributing to this unease. We'll hit the geopolitical, the economic, even the digital stuff shaping things right now.
Let's start with that feeling itself then, that Reddit thread. It was titled, Does anyone else feel like the world feels different now? And the person who posted it, they pinpointed it to sometime between 2017 to 2021, a strange shift in, quote, actual energy or colors.
Yeah, energy or colors. It's objective but powerful.
Totally. And the comments, wow, it's like a snapshot of a collective mood. People saying they feel on edge, or there's a nagging sense that something is off.
Or that the vibrancy is gone.
Exactly. That one really hit me. Someone actually said, all the color's been sucked from life. Pretty bleak.
It is. And, while it's personal, it sadly mirrors some of the macro stuff when you look at economic stagnation, the challenges people are facing.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
And what causes did they point to?
Right. What do people think was behind it? Well, some pointed to emotional social shifts, like a connective madness.
Connective madness. Wow.
Yeah. Feeling like people are less friendly, maybe more greedy, opportunistic, flakier, meaner, even cruel, or less educated.
A general decline in just niceness.
Seems like it. One person just lamented wanting to laugh with some friends, but finding even that felt like asking too much.
That's really sad.
It is. And then there's the bigger picture stuff, the existential dread. People talking about sliding toward dystopia,
Yeah.
saying the optimism of the 80s, 90s, and journeys is gone.
Yeah, that sense of forward progress feeling stalled, maybe.
Exactly. A fear the world is failing. Lots of people feeling like something is about to happen, not something good. That tension again.
Yeah, that foreboding. Though it's fair to say not everyone saw it exactly the same way, right?
True. There were other perspectives. Some older folks chimed in saying, the world is always changing. The pendulum swings. Basically, adapt.
A historical perspective. Makes sense.
Others thought it was more about perception. Like, maybe things were always like this, but people just started noticing it. Or maybe it's a sign of being depressed.
Which is also possible, of course. Individual mental health plays a role.
Definitely. And maybe one of the most striking explanations linked it to our digital lives.
The online factor.
People suggesting that being chronically online, constantly glued to the news, it just constantly pushes extreme views, conspiracies, and violence.
Right, which keeps you on edge. Gives you that impending sense of doom.
Exactly. A strong argument that the internet has changed us, creating what one user called an echo chamber of shite.
Well, that's descriptive.
Isn't it? It's like a place where entertainment and death sit side by side, reminding them of the Hunger Games. And many said disconnecting, getting off social media, actually improved their worldview, made things feel more normal.
Interesting. So a mix of personal feelings, perceived social shifts, and the definite impact of being constantly plugged in.
Yeah. But these feelings, especially the ones about global stuff, 2 wars going on, war, fear, even WW3 is coming, they're not just pulling that out of thin air, are they? What's the geopolitical reality check?
No, you're absolutely right. They're tapping into something real. The SpecialEurasia report for June 2025, it paints a highly unstable picture.
Okay.
What's really concerning is the Israeli-Iranian conflict sharply escalating around June 2025. We're talking Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, then Iranian retaliation with missiles, drones, even U.S. attacks getting involved, broadening the conflict.
Wow, okay, that's major.
It is, and it directly threatens energy supplies, obviously, but also just reinforces this risk of, more hostilities, proxy fights flaring up again.
So not an isolated flare-up.
Not at all. And beyond that specific conflict, the report also flags a resurgence of terrorism, like the Islamic State attack in Syria shows they still have capacity. Plus, you've got strategic shifts happening, recalibrations, they call it, in Central Asia and the Caucasus. Armenia looking more towards the west. Ongoing political issues in Georgia. It adds to the instability.
That's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
But, I mean, isn't there always some geopolitical tension somewhere? What makes these things, the Iran situation, the Red Sea stuff, will get to feel different or more impactful right now?
That's a really good question. I think it's the sheer concentration of it and how interconnected it all is. It's not just one regional issue anymore.
Okay.
Look at the Fractory report, the one on supply chains for 2025. It explicitly says global trade uncertainty is linked to geopolitical instability. And it cites the UN saying that in 2023, there were more violent conflicts globally since World War II.
Since World War II, that's huge.
It is. And it forced 110 million people from their homes. Just think about that number for a second. 110 million displaced.
Unbelievable.
And that report specifically calls out that China-Taiwan tensions, the Russia sanctions, these aren't just local problems. They ripple out across the entire global economy. Major economic threats.
Right.
And this lines up perfectly with the World Bank's June 2025 outlook. They state flat out, geopolitical tensions and regional conflict risks persist and could contribute to further geopolitical fragmentation.
Fragmentation, so less cooperation, more division.
Exactly, and they project lasting, concentrated output losses, especially hitting emerging markets and developing economies, the EMDEs, because of this worsening conflict. The raw numbers on armed conflicts, conflict deaths, they've risen substantially since the early 2000s. It all contributes to this feeling of instability.
Okay, so the ground is genuinely shaky geopolitically. And then there's the money side. That came up constantly in the Reddit thread, too. People just feeling squeezed.
The cost of living.
Yeah. Things are too expensive. Pay is stagnant. People describing this stark rich versus poor dynamic of feeling like politicians and corporations are playing in our fucking faces. Pretty raw.
Understandable frustration.
And one person gave a concrete example. Their rent for a one-bedroom went from $1,360 to $2,400 since 2020.
Wow. That's a massive jump. And sadly, the World Bank report backs up these worries. Global economic growth forecast to slow to 2.3% in 2025.
2.3%. How bad is that?
It's the weakest pace since 2008 if you exclude actual global recessions. So really sluggish. And it's broad-based, hitting lots of places, driven by things like higher trade barriers.
Trade barriers. Like tariffs.
Exactly. The U.S. effective tariff rate, it's now the highest in nearly a century. Plus, there's elevated uncertainty, financial volatility, just weakened confidence overall.
Okay, so growth is weak. What about inflation? Still feeling that.
Oh, yeah. Global headline inflation, it generally remains elevated compared to what central banks want. It's projected around 2.9% for 2025 and 2026.
Still feels high.
It is, and it's influenced by things like services prices, but also those trade restrictions we mentioned. They could push inflation higher. So yeah, that feeling that things are too expensive is unfortunately grounded in the data.
And these economic pressures, they don't exist in a bubble, right? They're tangled up with how stuff gets moved around the world. Supply chains.
Absolutely tangled.
Yeah.
Deeply. The Fractory report lays this out really clearly. Remember the Red Sea crisis?
Yeah, the Houthi attacks on shipping.
Right. Since October 2023, that's forcing ships to reroute all the way around Africa.
Which must cost a fortune.
Exactly. Increased shipping costs and altered trade routes. Some routes are apparently up to 5 times more expensive, and that directly fuels the accelerated inflation we were just talking about.
So a conflict there makes things more expensive everywhere else.
Pretty much. And that's just one supply chain headache.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah. The report lists several big challenges for 2025, like ocean freight bottlenecks and port congestion.
Right. Ships stuck waiting.
Yeah. Causes delays, overcrowded ports, made worse by shortages of containers, even warehouse space. Then there's labor shortages.
Whereabouts?
Critically, in Europe's trucking industry, like 17% of driving jobs are empty, and they expect it to get twice as bad by 2028.
Twice as bad. Wow. How does anything get delivered?
Good question. Then you've got raw material shortages.
Because of the geopolitics and port issues.
Exactly. It's a byproduct. Leads to production limits, more delays, and finally, believe it or not, the potential resurgence of COVID-19.
Still.
Yeah, new strains could mean lockdowns again, making it really tricky to forecast demand. It just shows how interconnected and maybe fragile things are.
Fragile is the word. And who gets hit hardest by all this?
Well, predictably, it's the vulnerable populations. The World Bank expects those EMDEs, emerging markets, and developing economies, their growth is slowing way below pre-pandemic levels, so progress on reducing poverty, not looking good. And the LICs, low-income countries, they're especially vulnerable. Growth forecasts are being cut because of conflict and less donor support. By 2030, they expect nearly 60% of the world's poor will be living in fragile and conflict zones. It's a tough outlook.
It really is. It makes you understand why some Reddit users were talking systemic issues, saying things like, capitalism isn't about innovation, it's about enshittification.
Enshittification, another evocative word.
Right, or that the pandemic has shown how fragile every system built by humans actually is. There's this strong undercurrent of feeling that, quote, the people who run the world are running it badly on purpose.
A real breakdown of trust in institutions, it sounds like.
Yeah. Okay, so we have these huge real-world challenges, geopolitical messes, economic pain, shaky supply chains. We touched on the digital side earlier, but let's really focus on that now. How much is how we see the world online shaping this different feeling?
A huge amount, I'd argue. That Reddit thread itself basically called out social media as a major amplifier.
Right, pushing extreme views.
Yeah, constantly pushing extreme views, conspiracies, violence, creating that impending sense of doom and really shaping your worldview.
And people found relief by logging off.
Exactly. Some explicitly said deleting social media improved their mental health, brought life back to normal. It's more than just news consumption, you know? It's the constant barrage of curated, often extreme content. It can mess with our cognitive biases, our emotional regulation.
Making the colors feel different, maybe.
It could absolutely contribute to that feeling that the vibrancy is gone. Our digital diet really does influence how we perceive reality.
Which creates this weird paradox, doesn't it? On one hand, people feel overwhelmed and anxious because of their digital lives. But on the other hand, that Fractory report mentions generative AI potentially boosting the global economy by trillions and improving supply chains by 25%.
Right. Technology presented as a solution.
Yeah, but that same technology is also a source of frightening concern for many people, as we saw on Reddit. So it cuts both ways.
It really does. It leads to this incredibly complex picture of our time. We're getting hit with actual crises, wars, economic slowdowns, climate changes in the background too, supply disruptions.
All very real.
All very real. And at the same time, our digital existence just immerses us in it all, sometimes to the point where we're either numb or completely overwhelmed. The objective data we've looked at, it paints a clear picture. The world is challenging, it is fragmented right now. But how that reality feels is definitely filtered and amplified by how we consume information online. It's both the external world and our perception of it.
What a deep dive this turned out to be. It feels clear now. That feeling so many of you describe the world feeling fundamentally different. It's not just in your head.
Not at all.
It really seems like a collective response to this perfect storm of shifts. The rising geopolitical heat, serious economic headwinds, and just the sheer influence of our digital, hyper-connected lives.
Indeed. And while the outlook from these reports, it does point to ongoing risks and challenges, it's not all doom and gloom. They do suggest ways forward, paths to resilience.
Okay, like what?
Well, the World Bank really emphasizes needing to revitalize global dialogue and cooperation, basically talking to each other more, tackling trade imbalances, supporting those vulnerable developing economies, addressing climate change.
Big systemic stuff.
Yes. But also things like the potential of technology-led investment and the importance of individual countries strengthening their own institutions, encouraging private investment. So there are levers to pull.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Maybe first, just acknowledging that the different feeling, it's valid. It's a real response to real changes.
Absolutely. Validation is important.
And maybe it's about being more conscious of information, how much you consume, where it's coming from, and just remembering how linked everything is. A conflict somewhere else can affect your grocery bill.
That interconnectedness is key, which leads to, I think, an important question for you to consider. In this world where fragility feels exposed, where challenges seem amplified, how can you use this understanding?
Use it how?
Well, not just to understand, but maybe to adapt, to contribute, whether that's focusing locally in your community or maybe advocating for that global cooperation the World Bank mentioned, or even just maintaining a critical, informed perspective as you navigate all the noise online. The question really is, how will you choose to engage with this different world?